Hey you, come, gather around the campfire, and welcome to the party. This is Party Chat, a JRPG podcast where we talk about everything in the JRPG genre and Eastern titles. I'm your host, Cameron Hawkins, along with my party partner, Kevin Kenson. Kevin, how you doing?
I am doing wonderful today. How are you, Cam?
I'm hanging in there. We went down to I went down to your neck of the woods over the past weekend. We went to the Square Enix pop-up shop. They had a lot of stuff that we both wanted that we both were just like, we ain't got the money for this.
I feel like we got there, I paid for parking, and then we went, what disposable income do we have right now for this stuff? Like, why are we, like, it's cool to look at. I did pick up a set of Chocobo playing cards, which I'd
We
seen
both
on
did.
their website before, and I was like, oh, that's actually a pretty good price. And, like, I can always use a standard deck of cards, so I grabbed that.
Yeah. I grabbed the same thing. There was definitely probably easily $200 to $300 worth of stuff that I immediately wanted, and some other stuff that I also would have if I had fuck you money, I would have bought. But yeah, I'm just I'm unemployed, I'm poor, I'm just gonna
I
pick
do want to
up
share
this deck of cards.
my favorite thing was we left the shop and then went about our day, and we walked by the shop again later, and we saw one dude walking out with the biggest grin on his face carrying 2 tote bags. And the important thing here is the tote bags were a reward for spending $150. So that dude dropped
Yes.
$300 plus and was just walking out with all this merch to this just pure joy on his face. Like, this was a man that just grabbed everything he wanted.
Yeah, I was just I
And
wish
I'm
that
trying
was
to be
me.
that way.
Yeah, I just wish that was me. They had a lot of really cool stuff there, and I think it's going on for a month. So if you live in the LA area or you're going to be in LA, go to little Akihabara and you can check out the shop yourself. But yeah, so before we get into the news for the week, we're going to do some housekeeping. Phantom Brave, The Lost Hero. We have a review for that right now on the podcast platforms of your choice and YouTube. I played Phantom Brave: The Lost Hero. I didn't finish it, so this is I have not rolled credits on the game, but I did talk about my experience with it so far. So if you are interested in that, that is available to you. It's up everywhere for everyone. And then if you've been enjoying the show, why don't you just pause the podcast really quick, or whether you're on video or your podcast audio platform, and just give us a quick 5-star rating, a quick subscribe, a quick follow, all that jazz, because it goes a long way. It helps us get exposure, and we would just really appreciate that. You can also support us on Patreon. We have a Patreon where we have a bunch of rewards, goodies for people. Depending on what tier you subscribe, we have an exclusive Discord where we talk around about different JRPGs. We've been talking about a lot of different stuff, especially with the Switch 2 reveal and everything. So it's been pretty popping in there. And then we also have we give you the podcast a day early. So if you're listening to this now, you can listen to it yesterday if you wanted to, assuming you're watching this the day this episode releases. And we also have a Q&A, which we are going to be recording our first Q&A next week. So if you wanted to ask any questions, you can subscribe to the Patreon, and you can ask us questions either on Patreon or through our Discord so we can answer them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be JRPG related either.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you guys want to know, why I hate Xenoblade 2, you can ask that and get some in-depth answers there. If you want to know what I had for breakfast the morning of the Q&A, that is an option as well. It was probably nothing. Yeah, just go ahead and join in if you want to be able to ask those questions. We're going to be recording that one, 5 days from when this video goes live? So
Yeah, Monday. So Monday the 27th is when we're going to be
join this
recording.
weekend if you get the chance, and get those questions in.
Yeah. And then we also have Campfire Catalog, our JRPG book club podcast. The first episode is going to be on Chrono Trigger, and that'll be coming hopefully, definitely before the end of March, but maybe earlier, depending on how quickly we're able to get through that game and just be able to record and talk about it. But man, next month is scary. Next month is scary release date wise, so we'll see what happens there.
It's
and then
exciting.
It's exciting.
It's how you frame it.
It's exciting, but it's also scary. I'm pumped, but I'm scared. And then go to youtube.com/Kevin Kenson and give Kevin that good old subscribe button. And let's get him to 1 million subscribers this year, because he's got, he still has a bit to go, but I think it's attainable. I think it's attainable. He can get it this year, especially with it being the year the Switch 2, like
Switch 2,
that's his
baby.
bread and butter content. So we should be able to get him there. We should be able to get him there, and it'll be really cool to see.
Excited. I'm so excited to talk about that thing nonstop. I'm excited to talk about real stuff. And maybe maybe we should just transition into our first news story, because
exactly
it is an update.
It is an update. The Switch 2 has officially been revealed. Nintendo revealed a trailer last Thursday, basically just showing us, yep, this thing exists. But there are some kind of Easter eggs that have been placed into the trailer that have gotten people discussing certain topics. And we kind of want to go over those things right now. But the first thing that we want to mention is that there is going to be a Nintendo Direct on April 2nd. So that's where we're going to get a good idea of the launch games that are coming to the Switch 2, the Switch 2 release date. I would like to assume, and a bunch of probably a bunch of other games that are going to come out like later in the year for the Switch platform. So that's exciting. A Direct is always exciting.
Always.
And on top of that, there's going to be a Switch 2 experience events that are happening around the world. There's a whole list of locations and dates, of which I will read off really quick for those that are interested. And you have to go onto Nintendo's website, and you have to basically register the day and time slot that you would like to try and get in for. And I believe that's available. You can register until the 27th. Is that correct?
I don't remember the cutoff date off the top of my head, but yeah, that sounds about the right region. I love how stressful that choice is. Like, I kind of get why they took this approach, but as someone who like really wants to get in, like not just because I want to try the thing out, but because it ties into work for me, I'm just playing this game of like, which of these slots is going to have the least competition? Because it is lottery based. It's not first come, first serving like that. They're just taking all the entries they can right now. You can only pick one day and time slot to apply for. And then however many people apply for that slot, they're just going to raffle off X amount of winners. I don't know if they've clarified how many people actually get to play per slot. But yeah, so there's just this game you get to play a little bit with yourself of like, if I'm available these days, which one has the least amount of other people also applying?
Yeah, exactly. And most of the days are like Friday through Sunday. So like you'd think that Friday would be the easiest because people are working still.
But it's also the first day. So there's like the hype of like first, like get in, like I can take the day off work. I can call in sick, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So the dates and locations are the following. New York, April 4th to the 6th. Paris, April 4th to the 6th. Los Angeles, April 11th to the 13th. London, April 11th to the 13th. Berlin, Dallas, Milan, Toronto, all April 25th to the 27th.
Damn.
Tokyo, April 26th to the 27th. Amsterdam, Madrid, and Melbourne are May 9th to the 11th. Seoul, May 31st to June 1st. And then Hong Kong and Taipei are both to be announced. So if you are from Hong Kong or Taipei and you want to get into the Switch 2 experience, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer. But I did look it up, and you have until end of day Sunday, this coming Sunday, the 26th, to register. And then who knows when you're actually going to find out if you get in or not.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things that was immediately noticed when watching that reveal trailer was the backwards compatibility kind of disclaimer.
Yeah, like we got all this very fun, like quick look at what the system looks like and a couple little teases, but I think the first thing that I saw people like get a response from was the ending note where it says it's backwards compatible, which is what a lot of people were hoping and kind of assuming. And then there's the disclaimer text of like, not all titles. which like I feel like that's a fairly standard boilerplate kind of thing, right? It's like there's just always exceptions. Like every back
Yeah.
compat, there's always going to be those games that just don't work precisely right for whatever reason. You know, it was developed for that very specific hardware in some weird way. Um, but it inspired a little fear in some folks because it was like, well, what does that mean? Which games? Like, can I still play Zelda? Can I still play? And like most big first party stuff, probably safe. It's really just like those titles that are. It is much more likely that it's really just those handful of titles that like require something very specific, either because it relies on the dimensions of the system, like some of the Labo stuff. Like you're probably not going to be able to use Labo if you love Labo. Stick with your regular Switch for that, I guess. The one that I have seen some theorizing about is that, at least based on the shots we're seeing of the Joy-Cons, it's not clear if the IR sensor is coming back, which was something in the Joy-Con that not very many games took advantage of, but there are some that did. For example, Ring Fit,
which is a great game.
Which is a great game, yeah. It's not important to like actually doing the physical activities, but the IR sensor is how it detects your heartbeat. And so, you know, that might be a situation where you can still play it, but it's just going to always be mad at you for not being able to measure your heart rate because it just can't. It doesn't have that technology in it. That does raise the question to me of what this means for back compat of Joy-Cons. Because you would think that in those situations you could just use the old Joy-Cons, but it's not supported.
But I think that's just to kind of cover their bases on if they don't have original. Because I'm going with the assumption that old, at least first party Switch accessories are going to be usable on the Switch too.
Yeah, as long as you don't have to attach to like the rail mechanism, because that's just different. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that Ring Fit is going to be playable on the Switch 2. You just need the Switch 1 Joy-Cons to be able to do that.
That's definitely a best case scenario.
Yeah, that would be my assumption. I would honestly be kind of surprised if that wasn't the case. But also it's Nintendo, so who knows?
Yeah, I agree. Like, generally speaking, like when they've done back compat, they have been good about allowing for old controller support. I mean, when the Wii launched, it had GameCube ports. Generally, they've been pretty good about it. So I feel like you're right. I feel like, you know, old Joy-Cons won't be able to attach directly to the system, but a wireless connection to still use them. And maybe for those games that need those functions, will hopefully still support it. But we'll learn more in April. That's definitely one of the big hanging questions, I think, that people just want a strong answer on. Because we can give all the assurances you want of like, oh yeah, most games are going to be fine. And I really do believe that. But until Nintendo themselves go, here's the list of 8 games that won't work, everyone's just going to be a little on edge about it.
Yeah, I agree. Other things I'd mentioned regarding the Joy-Cons is seemingly, which I believe was kind of theorized based off of the leaks, was that there is like ways to use the Joy-Con as a mouse. You kind of see them vertical, kind of sliding around in the trailer, and so people are just like, oh, and there's like an attachment that you specifically put on top of it to kind of so it's not like directly rubbing up against the table. And like, why would you need that unless you were doing that? So and the only thing that you would use that for is for a mouse.
Yeah, and it did look like when they show the inside of the Joy-Con that there was a little I'm forgetting the proper term right now, but basically the little laser light that would be used for tracking. For mouse movement. I think it's neat. I'm excited to learn more about that because it could be one of those features where like nothing actually comes of it except for 3 games. Rest in peace, Wii U. But it could also be the thing where, you know, there are some very specific titles. Like I know one thing I've seen a lot of people want from a feature like that is to either do a proper sequel or remake of the Kid Icarus game from 3DS, where like instead of the touchscreen functionality, you do a mouse style input for the movement. That would be cool. Like I'm down. Like that's something that I'd be hyped for. I love that game on 3DS, so like that'd be neat. I just don't know how many. It's one of those things where it's like I feel like Nintendo's going to come up with a couple fun ideas, and I have no idea if any third-party company is going to touch it.
Yeah, I think the people outside of like the first party stuff, I think the communities that were like the most kind of curious and like optimistic about it were like the strategy community of like, oh, Civ 7 with a mouse, or like like those
Sure.
type of games where you can play it a little bit more how I don't want to say how it's meant to be played, but like I feel like that, that is a genre where like you're gonna get a quicker, more ideal experience using a mouse and keyboard, or at the very least a mouse, kind of like Baldur's Gate 3, right? Like I think
Sure.
that's a game that benefits more from a mouse, just for like the minute to minute gameplay
Yeah.
than a controller.
I agree. And there's a lot of like pause and play top down RPGs where, you're controlling a party and like it gets hectic to do that on a controller. Like a lot of those games I stick to PC because I like KBM for it. Um and funny enough, actually Baldur's Gate 3, I started off KBM, and after I tried it out on Steam Deck, I just got used to controller and ended up preferring it. Like I just did it enough that it became natural to me.
Yeah,
Which is
I'm
rare
not
for
saying
that
yeah,
genre.
yeah, I'm sure like it's great on controller. I know that for myself. I was just like, oh, I can see what this type of game is. Like, I
Yeah.
think as someone who really doesn't like to use a mouse and keyboard, like really doesn't like to use a mouse and
Right.
keyboard, that's just like, oh no, this kind of this makes more sense to me. But yeah, so that's cool. We'll see more about that probably April 2nd. And the last thing that was worth mentioning from that reveal is that we got a new Mario Kart. There's a few things that are worth mentioning. Nothing too crazy. One is seemingly 24 racers at one
Yes.
time. And I'm curious if that is going to be like a specific mode, or if that is going to be a specific like multiplayer, like online multiplayer thing,
Hmm.
because it kind of reminds me of like some of the new modes in Super Mario Party Jamboree, where it's like, oh, it's this many people, like it's and it's a completely its own mode, but it has significantly more people and it's online only. So I'm curious if that is going to be, if that is a certain aspect to it, or if that is just like how it's going to be from just in general. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Uh, I would not mind if it was like the standard, because I like that kind of hecticness. I think Mario
Mm,
Kart is like exactly the kind of game where like, there's probably an upper limit where it gets ridiculous. 100 racers might be a little much, but like I think going from the standard and bumping it up to 24, like that just sounds like a net positive to me. Like I don't think I would ever want to have fewer racers on the track personally. I want the madness. So I'm down if that's just
mm,
like the default how it works. But yeah, I could see it being maybe like an optional mode thing or something that works a little different for some specific modes.
interesting. I I can understand where you're coming from, but I'm also just like, dang, just thinking about 24 racers that all have like a bunch of items, and like
That's
unless they make those tracks, like, because I do feel like that this has to go hand in hand. Like if you're gonna add 24 racers, you got to add bigger tracks. Those tracks
yeah.
got to be like they got to be bigger, they got to be longer. And so if that doesn't happen, I don't know how I feel like that is just, you're consistently driving and you're consistently being hit by shit, and that sounds really annoying.
Yeah, I mean,
So
to be fair, that is what is it? 12 racers right now in 8 Deluxe, right?
yes.
Yeah. So that's twice, well, not exactly twice mathematically, but that is a almost double increase in the number of blue shells that could come flying your way. They might adjust,
Exactly.
I mean, they'll probably adjust item uh
Oh yeah.
showing up as a result, right? Like there's going to be some bounces to account for it. They're not just going to have everything be the exact same.
But I guess my thought process is like, yeah, if they could like balance out the amount of like blue shells, but then they would also could make it that like bananas are just like way more common too,
Sure.
because that's kind of like the basic.
Yeah, and like litter the track with them, which they actually become a bit more
Yeah.
of a real threat when there's that many around. I will say, like, I mean, because it's the shortest clip, so there's so much more they could show for this game. I do hope we see like some kind of, like we were talking about in the last podcast. I do want to see them do like one kind of mix up. Like the 24 thing is cool. I hope that's not like the only big spin. I don't think it will be, but
Hmm.
that's definitely like my next question is like, so what are we doing here? What's weird? I
Yeah,
think I
there's
saw
no,
some.
yeah, where's the gimmick? Because we didn't show any anti-gravity stuff. They
Yeah.
didn't show anything like that.
I saw some theories about having like a gas tank mechanic, because you can see on the carts that there's like a little gas can style attachment, and then it looked like there was a pit stop at the start of that race. I mean, this is reaching at whatever minute details you can get from 3 seconds of gameplay. So it could very well be absolutely nothing. But that was
Dang,
one theory I saw going around.
they might be taking Sonic Riders mechanics. That's crazy.
Yeah. I do have one other question about Mario Kart for you on this one, because I
Yeah,
know this has been
yeah.
a heated topic for some people, and I personally am not that invested. Like, I don't, it doesn't bother me. How do you feel about Donkey Kong?
If I had to choose one side or another, I would say I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah.
I know that it's more of the like original OG design, but I also feel like they changed it for a reason, that it looked too goofy. And I understand because of the success of the Super Mario movie, like they, that is just a way of kids to be like, "Oh, it's from like the Mario movie," that type of thing. But I just personally am not a big fan of it. And like, if there was a new, traditional Donkey Kong game, I would be like, because like, imagine,
Don't do
I
this.
guess like, because here's the thing, like, in my opinion, if you were going to remodel Donkey Kong, you got to remodel all the Kongs.
Sure. Well,
And
I
I
mean,
don't,
we're already seeing that happen
and
a little bit, like outside of Donkey Kong. Like Princess Peach, there was all kind of reactions to Showtime. She doesn't look like the movie Peach, but she's like a couple steps in that direction from her more standard design. Like it's kind of a split the difference.
I thought she looked the exact same. I'm not gonna lie.
No, it's
But
definitely like a little altered, especially on like the cover art and stuff.
I that is fine. And like, because even with Mario, like Mario looks more designed from his Wonder design than his older design. It's very, you really have to like kind of put them side by side to really notice. But he's like a little bit chubbier in the cheeks,
Yeah,
and like,
it actually
and
reminds
that's
me. It reminds me a lot of Super Mario RPG, the remake, that 3D version, where he's just a little more like bigger head. The proportions are a little more all over the place,
but the thing
chibi
is,
almost.
like, if I didn't watch like people like talk about it, I wouldn't have noticed. I would have been like, oh yeah, it's Mario. You know what I mean? And so like, that's kind of how I feel about the Peach. But with like the Kongs, like,
That stood out.
I think that Donkey Kong, like, I don't think like that kind of design around the eyes and stuff would transfer well to like Diddy Kong and the
Sure.
other Kong characters. And so like, you can just be like, oh, this one's just gonna stay the same, but it's just gonna be jarring to me. And it's just
Yeah.
like, and I'm not saying that like I'm against characters getting redesigned. I'm just not a big fan, particularly of that one, because like with Donkey Kong, like originally, like Donkey Kong has always kind of been like this weird, like sometimes he's playing the hero, sometimes he's playing like an antagonist, and like I think his previous design like reflects that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Now he looks
Kind of goofy.
like yeah, a goofy guy with nothing going on upstairs, like no one's home,
Banana.
and he does, yeah, and he just
Banana.
seems exactly, and I just don't particularly vibe with it. I don't think
Yeah.
it's like terrible, but I'm just like, okay, I prefer the other style.
Yeah, I get that. Plus, it's like it's one of those things where it is a little jarring because of how long it's been since he's gotten a significant redesign. Like, there's been
Yes.
minor adjustments over the years, but basically since Donkey Kong Country, that he has looked this way. There's been little updates across generations and like system shifts, but like they were very comparable. And this is the first time in since the '90s, basically, where it's like, oh, that is a different Donkey Kong.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
like, I get it. Change is scary. I'm kind of down for it, to be honest. Like, I dig like the little bit of classic vibes to it, but I absolutely understand where the upset comes from on that.
Yeah, and I want to say like ultimately, like, I do not care. But because
Right.
you asked me, I'm going to be like, okay, here's my like
Yeah, if you have to take a
opinion,
stance.
but I have to take a stance. But like ultimately, I don't care about Donkey Kong like that.
Sure. Neither of us are DK stands, so we don't have a
Yeah,
lot of investment into this other than like, yeah, I guess this is my side on that issue. Whatever.
yeah, exactly. Agreed. Um,
The green Skittle should be green apple. Um, anyways,
so for our next story, we got some comments from Sakaguchi on his future games and the struggles of game development. He did an interview with Eurogamer where he talked about a bunch of different things. You should definitely read like the full article, but there's a few things that I picked out from here that I think that were worth discussing. Um, the first being that he would rather work on something new rather than like a remake or a remaster, which makes me sad because we need the last story on modern platforms. Like I don't like I will go back to the Wii to play it, but I don't want to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I will say, like, minor counterpoint to that, like, I don't know how much he's necessary for that. You know what I mean? Like if they wanted to do a
That's
full remake
true.
or something, but like if he just has to give his blessing and
That's
just the
true.
team gets handed like that, those could still happen without him.
But
You
why
know?
haven't they happened at this point? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that's what I'm saying. Like that is one of the few games that is on the Wii still
yeah.
that I need
Uh,
to just get out of there.
Project,
Get
what
out
was
of
it?
there.
Project Rainfall, the trio of games where it was Xenoblade, Last Story, and was it Tower of something Tower? I can't remember the name right now. There's a third one.
Oh,
There
yes,
were
I know
three
what you're
JRPGs that were like originally not going to come to the West, and uh, yeah, that we ended up getting them, thankfully.
yeah, yeah. We'll see. Um but basically, yeah, so he has a quote. He says, quote, "The type of team I like to direct and work with in terms of making a game, it's almost the same, in my opinion, to have a full remake versus making something brand new. So if at all possible, I would like to continue giving birth to something new and bringing these different worlds to life as much as possible before I perish." End quote.
That's a word choice right
Yeah,
there. Was that translated or was that like what he said? Because
I
perish is
don't
a
know.
word choice, man. That is.
I don't know. I don't know. But I do think that there's I think what's really great about Sakaguchi's games and like the direction is that you feel like the kind of emotional expressions of what he's going for in his titles.
Sure.
And like there's definitely like there's like a vision behind those games like thematically in a way that kind of hit I'm not saying that like other JRPG directors don't do, but he has like a distinct style and a distinct feel.
Yeah.
And
The
so
benefit of like enough projects to where you get that feeling, right? Like we've been exposed to it enough where it's like, oh, I know what the Sakaguchi flavor is.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, and even with Fantasian, basically, he's just like, hey, this is like what I would want my ideal, like, magnum opus Final Fantasy to be, which, you know, which is really cool. And like, I really want to get to that game. I really, really do.
Yeah.
It's just there's so many games right now.
I do love how we got like on three separate occasions, like, okay, what if I made Final Fantasy but I'm not with Square? Because it's
Yeah,
like we got Lost Odyssey, then we got Last Story, which I mean, come on, Last Story. That name alone, like, is very obviously
yeah.
a point back, and then Fantasian, which is a little more different, but it still has a bit of that vibe of, you know, if I was still working on this franchise. And I think that's even in the interview as he mentions like Fantasian's kind of a if technology was going a certain way while I was still doing Final Fantasy, this is kind of where it would end up.
Yeah, and he also mentions that like, you know, where he was at as a person and as a game director, like when FF6 came out was very is different to like
Sure.
now. And I think that's just kind of like how it's been as he's released all the Mr. Walker titles. It's just like, you know, events in life change. Like, you know, he
Yeah.
talks about like being a grandpa now and like all those things like that affect how he makes games, which is really, really cool. I like how personable he is with like I feel that we don't get a whole lot from developers. Like I think that he
Yeah.
like kind of goes just like one layer deeper than we get you know, like just like this level of honesty
Yeah.
and what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, it's like we
Um
we run into this situation with a lot of devs, and this isn't true of everyone, of course. And some devs just get more attention and spotlight because of their legacy and what games they've released and stuff. But I think it's more often either run into creators that have a bit of that auteur energy, where like they want to really sell like the high concept of what they're working on and what they're doing, and they don't talk necessarily about like the personal aspect always.
mhm.
Um, or dudes just want to be private. You know, like just not
Yeah,
everyone's
no,
always that
just
like,
totally
and like it's not a negative thing, it's just how it
no.
is. And so it is that breath of fresh air to have that with someone who can, you know, be a little more vulnerable talking about those things, certainly.
Yeah, it's like I can't compare him to an exact movie director at this point because there's like so many, but like he just feels like one of those movie directors that like he was like super prolific during a specific time and then he kind of just like disappeared for a bit
Yeah.
and then he just kind of like shows up when he wants to and it's like, oh yep, here's
Yeah.
this.
I was actually thinking when you were talking about stuff like him mentioning stages of his life, not to just compare Japanese creative to Japanese creative, but Miyazaki a little bit came to mind just because, he had that body of work with Studio Ghibli for a while. And it's like, all right, I'm out, I'm retiring. And then he kind of went, oh man, I really hate everything being made for like the age range of my grandkids. Now I'm going to like come back and make another movie because I want something like this to exist. And
Yeah.
like that's like a thing. Like he's been open about how like, yeah, I want it out and now never mind. Like I feel a need to create or do this. And even like Boy and the Heron, which I've yet to see actually, I've heard a lot of reactions where it almost feels like a biopic in some ways, where it's like if you've been following his body of work, you see how this is a culmination of it. And so that's just where my brain went a little bit when talking about like a similar film creative. This idea of like you're seeing how the work has evolved with them as a person as time passes.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And then he also comments kind of a bit on AI and how like that can or should like be implemented into game development. And he is very clear that he wants to be careful about what he's saying here because he knows that it is one, a hot topic in the industry, and two, just like this kind of I would argue like untreaded ground. It's still like kind of pretty early and like, hey, like does like if this hypothetically does have a place, what does that look like in a
Yeah,
way that doesn't that is beneficial and
sure.
there's definitely like just coming from my personal opinion, there's this morality of AI, right? Like, there's like, oh, these people, there are people that can get paid to do this, no matter how easy or the job may be. Like, this can affect someone's livelihood for the better. And that's like something that I just want to like talk from my like personal opinion and perspective. And like, I'm not going to pretend like I'm super duper knowledgeable about that stuff, but I do know that like, hey, people can get jobs from these opportunities. Kev, did you want to say anything before I go on to his comment?
No, I mean I'm kind of on the same page there, and part of the problem is that like, look, I love video games and I love talking about this stuff. I am not a dev, and there's a lot of stuff
Yeah,
on the back end there where, if there is a question of a suitably allowable enough level of AI involvement, what is that and where does that feel right? Right? Because I will say, like, from a creative standpoint, look, straight up generative AI, I'm not a fan. Anything where you could hire an artist or hire someone to like actually
agreed.
make a thing, I don't like that. And I don't like generative being the end result. Like I don't like someone just plugging in a prompt and being like, here it is, here's the thing made. I will say where it gets a little more gray, and this is something I experimented with a little bit in the early years, and I stopped because I just didn't like where the whole AI train was going. I think there's something maybe to workshopping ideas. Like I've used ChatGPT in the past as like a soundboard, just to where like I got no one to talk to right now. I'm just gonna type and like think of concepts. And so there is something where I think there can be some playful aspect of that, but at the end of the day, that could also just be more people in the room talking ideas and
Yeah.
building a thing. Like there's a reason I stopped doing that too. So I, yeah, it's tough. I feel like I can't give a fully informed opinion on it just because I'm not a part of that particular process. I can only say what I, as a consumer of that and someone who does other creative endeavors, how I feel on it, and I don't really care for it.
Yeah. No, agreed. Uh, but yeah, so basically Sakaguchi says, quote, one of the most important resources in game development is the amount of time it takes to really prepare to make a game of a certain caliber, a certain scope. Whether it's the character animations, the models, before a game can take shape, there is an immense amount of preparation work that needs to happen. And that has only increased as time has gone on. I want to be careful with my words here, but I think the use of AI to assist the prep work is something that could perhaps really improve the game industry and what we can express because the development cycles right now, I think, are what takes so many resources out of the entire game budget. End quote. Uh, yeah, it's one of the kind of like what I was saying earlier. It's just like it's kind of AI is kind of in this weird place of like where can it be where can it be beneficial that doesn't take away the artistic integrity
Yeah.
of what is being created. Um, and I think that, and again, I'm not a game developer either. Like, I am ignorant on this stuff. And he's very much clear saying like, hey, all of the artistic stuff, like that, leave that to the people. But like the things that can kind of like trim the fat on the things that can get people, get the teams to that phase where they can start focusing on the artistry, could be something that AI could be implemented for. Um, and there is, and this more goes hand in hand with like the games are fucking expensive to make nowadays, and they take so long to make, and it's just how I think this is more a bigger question on like how do we find the solutions to make that like timeline be shorter but not affecting the quality of the work and things like that. uh Kev, do you have anything to say?
Um, Again, like I feel like we're mostly on the same page with this, and I
Yeah.
think when it comes to the question of expensiveness of games, I mean that's a whole other topic that we could dive into someday about like, is it a matter of scale? Is it a matter of because there can be situations where like, sure, maybe AI speeds up that process, but are we going to be happy with what the resulting product looks like on it? Like, there's already so many debates about the quality of AAA games as they
Hmm.
are because of how expensive they get, and oftentimes what and not that I mean any game ends up having to have sacrifices and compromises over time, but like that especially happens in the AAA space because you hit a point where it's like we're this far in dev, we really need to release something at some point, and you know, vision versus where we're actually at in development. Here's where we're at. Um, and so, like, if AI speeds that up, is it a final quality we'd even be happy with? Because I already know, like, there are situations where it's a bit different, but the tapping into things like procedural generation for things, I know I don't enjoy that as much in some games. Like some games where it's built around that concept, sure, but like I think a big example for me would be something like what's been happening with Bethesda and their games over time, where they've been leaning more and more into certain procedural aspects to build out their games. Like Starfield's whole thing was, oh, there's all these planets and it's actually going to be a little different for each player because the universe is being made like when you boot up and go into it. And so each planet's going to have their own thing. And like that's kind of cool, but also every planet's just kind of the same bland feeling of different cookie cutter parts, and I don't actually care. And where I actually
Okay.
had fun with that game was like the handcrafted stuff. Like the faction quests in that game are fantastic. I loved that stuff. That was when I was like having my most fun with it. And so just seeing examples like that already, where that's kind of a earlier on version of that, and it's not like full blown AI is just doing this part of the production. I feel like at the end of the day, human hands and human eyes are going to be the better way to go. There's
No, for
efficiency,
sure.
but then there's just like make a thing. Like make a thing because you want that thing to be good and exist, not just because a product has to get released.
No, I agree completely. And I also think it kind of speaks highly, and we've talked about this before, I'm pretty sure on the podcast, definitely off the podcast, but like I think that's why we see a lot of success from studios like Falcom and RGG and Atlas, where they reuse assets like crazy. Like they have like absolutely no shame
Yeah.
in reutilizing the assets that they've made for for several games, because it shortens dev time. It shortens like it makes those things easier, and it allows them to focus also more on things like the writing, and it gives more time for those worlds to feel more fleshed out, especially from like RGG and Falcom, and like how they make worlds feel like these same locations feel like that they've passed time and evolved, and things like that. That But again, we're not game devs. We don't know how any of this works in a real way, in a way that like is I think can be like educational. um but
Yeah. Maybe that'd
we
be
do
maybe
we
that's
have
something
our
worth
out.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say maybe that's something worth us revisiting at some point, and we get someone we know who is on that side, because I feel like there's a few people we could reach out to just to get that like more
We definitely could.
informed on that aspect. Because again, like not to say that we don't know anything, like part of our job is to pay attention to these things, but ultimately
Sure.
there is that personal touch and knowledge and expertise that eludes either of us.
Yeah, there is a back door of in a sense that like, you don't know unless you've gone like you've opened that door, which we like primarily have not. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Next story, short and simple. Sonic 4 is set to
Yeah.
release March 19th, 2027. Did you see Sonic 3?
I haven't yet. I'm very bad about going to movie theaters.
You were so excited.
Oh, unfortunately,
Yeah!
no,
I
because
was in Sonic
I
3.
am very excited for when Sonic 3 hits like Paramount or whatever streaming platform it goes to, because like I'm gonna check it out right away. Christine, part of the problem too is here's what happened. My wife went and saw it with her friends because some of them are very heavily Sonic pilled, and it's
Yes.
like I'm not gonna have us pay for 2 movie tickets. Like I'm not gonna go by myself, and I'm not gonna like get you a movie ticket to see a movie. Like I'll wait till it comes to streaming. I can be patient. I'm excited for when it does. I mean, I love the first 2 movies. For entirely different reasons, I did enjoy the Knuckles TV show.
Okay.
Yeah, like I honestly think like as far as movie adaptations go, I'm not even that big of a Sonic head, and I think they're probably my favorite like game adaptations in the movie space. There's a lot of TV shows I'd put above, but movie space, I think it's my favorite.
Did you see the Chippendale Rescue Rangers movie?
Yes. Oh,
What
Ugly
a
Sonic.
what that was so genius. That was
I
so genius of them using like they bought
Yeah.
the old Sonic model so that they could use it in the movie. Oh
And
gosh, sorry,
made him the
I just
most
thought about that.
ridiculous character. That movie like overall was like fine, but some of my favorite
Oh,
bits
really?
were
I
just
really
like
like that movie.
I was okay with it. Like it was like fun. I don't know. I didn't like stick with me, but I did love the Sonic bits.
It didn't stick with me. That was like the thing that stuck with me the most because it was just so unexpected and like how that did not leak is
Yeah.
like very surprising. But yes, if you haven't watched that movie, I forgot the full name, but it's Chippendale something something. It's on Disney Plus. You should watch it. Anyway, yeah, I'm excited for Sonic 4. Did you see the logo?
I did.
Okay,
And
so I'm sure you can get a good sense as to what new characters are coming
yeah,
to
I mean,
Sonic 4.
I will say the internet being what it is, I already know the post credits.
Oh, you
scene
already
for
knew. You
free.
already knew.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like it
yeah,
just like
yeah,
that's unavoidable, and I accept that with not seeing it as soon as possible. I don't get
yeah.
that upset about spoilers, but I do know the post credits scene.
I do. You have a fan casting for Amy? Spoilers
Which, by the
for
way, guys,
Sonic 3. Yeah, spoilers. Amy's coming, and then Amy is
uh,
here.
I don't like I said, like I like the Sonic movies a lot, but I don't consider myself like a hardcore Sonic fan. So
Sure.
like I don't really have like in my head, and like I'm not huge on Amy anyways, so like I'm sure there's some great picks. I don't have anything off the top of my head.
I genuinely think, and granted, it might be because I'm a huge like movie guy, like alongside games. I think my fan castings are normally heat. Obviously, I feel like most people feel that way about
I
theirs. Like,
mostly have good opinions, like I'm just on it. I'm just right all the time.
well, because like the thing was like, people were people were wanting were like excited when there were like rumors that it was like Robert Pattinson, and then it was like Hayden Christensen and that's what
Yeah,
I wanted. Like that's not like my fan casting, but I was just like, oh man, Hayden Christensen, that would be so cool.
I
And
think it
Keanu
actually,
Reeves is great.
yeah,
Keanu Reeves is great. I just want to see Hayden Christensen in more things at this point. That's
for
basically
sure.
where I'm
And I
at.
actually think as far as just like a sound of voice match to match, I actually think Hayden would be a little more like closer to the game sound. I think
I
like
agree.
what we've
I
heard
agree.
before. Not, I mean, again, I haven't seen 3 yet. I'm sure Keanu kills it. I love Keanu as well.
Yeah, he's great.
Uh,
He's great in
but
it.
just from hearing like early on when there were those rumors, I'm like, oh yeah, Hayden, like that's a good like sound match. Like that sounds like a good choice.
Yeah, yeah. But there's only one fan casting that I was like, I got it, which was Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop in the MCU. Like that was my fan casting for so long, and I was so happy when she got casted for it. But for me, for Amy on this one, Stephanie Shu. Stephanie
Okay.
Shu as Amy. I think Stephanie Shu is fucking hilarious. Like I know that a lot of people really just know her from Everything Everywhere All at Once. But if you watch her in like Joyride, which is a hilarious movie, if you watch her like in other things where she's like doing more comedy stuff, she's really funny, and I think she would really do Amy justice. Tell me, tweet me at Camp Final Mix or like whatever to tell me if that is a good fan casting or not. But I think it is. So, next story: Dynasty Warriors Origins reached a concurrent player count on Steam of
Eh.
69,000, making it the second highest player count for a Koei Tecmo game, after Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which Wolong was like at 75. So not far off, not far off. That's cool. We're gonna get into that a bit as you've played Dynasty Warriors Origins. But I've heard really great things. We've kind of talked about it before. I want to check it out eventually sometime this year, and it's just, it's nice when like a series that everyone kind of knows about by name, but never really like got that kind of AAA level exposure or praise, is like finally getting its due.
Yeah.
Even if it's like not a series that I don't really care about, like Dynasty Warriors. Like we've talked about Muso games a little bit on here, but I've never really been a Dynasty Warriors guy. And just seeing that like, oh, it's really taken off. It's really getting its due, kind of like Monster Hunter World, like back in 2020, I think it was, or something like that.
Yeah, where it like really blew up the audience more. Like Monster Hunter always had like that dedicated audience, but World was certainly when like a lot more people became aware of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into a little bit more in depth because that is my what I've been playing. So we'll get to our I think we have one more news story, or was that it?
We have two more news stories. One of them's really short, but the next one is Resident Evil 6 may be getting an Xbox and PS5 re-release after getting a new ESRB rating for Xbox Series consoles. You're the Resident Evil guy, Kevin. So what are your thoughts on this?
Certainly. Well, first off, I do find it interesting in that there is a way to natively play Resident Evil 6 right now because it is on Xbox One and PS4. So like via backcompat, you can go to the store right now, buy it and download it. Like there's no reason you can't do that on a current system right now. So I am curious. I doubt this is full-blown remake because, as far as remakes go, we left off at 4. So as much as I want the next one to be Code Veronica, if they were going to go in number order, it'd be 5. So it sounds like it's just going to be maybe a remaster, polished up a little bit. It could be the PS4 version or whatever is locked at 1080, so this is upping it to 4K. I don't know. But I do find that a little interesting. It could also just be that Resident Evil's on so much fire right now that they just want to like have a chance to remarket the game and be like, hey, like buy this re-release, get on it. I will say 6 is like, anyone that has paid attention to the Resident Evil franchise, 6 has a reputation.
Yes.
I feel like
5 does too.
5
I feel like they both do for different reasons.
5 was for different reasons. Yeah, like because like 5 like got a little more actiony, and like that was when they were like, oh, co-op, that's the focus. And then 6 was like, hey, what if we just got rid of any survival aspect of this game? Like, what if it was just action?
Yeah.
And I will say, if it was not Resident Evil, even if it was a side game, if they pitched it as something else, I actually think in and of itself, it's like a fun co-op shooter. Like, I think if you can grab a buddy and just go through the campaign and put aside what you want Resident Evil to be, it's a good time. But if you go in like, man, I love Resident Evil 2 Remake, I love, Resident Evil 4, I can't wait to dive into 6, it's not those games. Like remotely.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're doing, as much action as 4 has, 6 is just off the walls in terms of, all the fancy moves characters are doing and how much ammo they throw at you to just unload on enemies. Yeah, it's a good time. It's just not like, if you like the briefcase and you think it's the coolest thing to sort your stuff, that's not happening in 6. Like, that is just not what it's about. Yeah, it's a neat one. I like, I'm curious what exact form this is going to take. Because again, there is a native way to play it already on current systems. So I'm curious what this is going to bring to the table outside of being like
probably like 4K support.
Yeah.
It'll be like more or less a remaster, right? Like it may not be called like remastered, but it's definitely going to have. It's kind of like It's kind of like the opposite of Ni no Kuni Remastered, where like the PS4 version was an actual remaster.
Yeah.
The Switch version was just a port of the PS3 version, but they still called it remastered.
Or like The Last of Us Part 2, where it's like it's a PS5 native version. Like there's cool new stuff, but it's not like you went back and redid everything. Like
yeah, exactly. Last story.
The last story.
One-Winged Angel was included in the Louis Vuitton Men Fall Winter 2025 fashion show.
This one's all you.
This is just cool. I mean, is this not cool? Is this not just cool? Is a cool fun fact? You know what I mean?
I mean, like, it's a cool fun fact. I don't like. Look, I don't go there. I don't like fashion stuff. I'm just like it's cool. It
I
made
don't
its
give a
way
fuck
out
about fashion. I don't give a fuck about fashion shows. I just saw like it's like the Final Fantasy VII Twitter account posted it that like, oh, because Pharrell Williams was the music director for the event apparently.
Right.
And I was just like, that's sick as shit. And I saw them doing the walk and like the One Winged Angels playing in the background. I'm like, this is cool.
I mean, that does go hard.
Yeah.
I will say, like, we're a little late on this news story. We didn't talk about this one, but something similar. Because I also, like, I know there's a huge cross-section of video game fans and wrestling. I'm not in there. But one thing I saw that was really cool was Kenny Omega getting a, what's the term? Intro theme, walkout theme,
intro
whatever.
theme
Yeah, intro theme that was done by Soken, which if you don't know who that is, he's the composer for Final Fantasy 16 and 14, amongst other titles. That is incredible. Just the coolest, like,
100%.
like being able to have that as a flex. Like, oh, you like this composer? Yeah, they did my opening.
It's very cool. Very cool. So that's the news for the week. We're gonna get into what we've been playing. As I said, Phantom Brave review. You can check that out on not socials, on podcast platforms and YouTube. That's what I've been playing. So this is all Kev this episode. Kev, what have you been playing?
Yeah, I got two I want to talk about today, one more than the other. And we'll start with Dynasty Warriors Origins, since we already kind of touched on that a little bit. Quick background with me on that series. I played a bunch of Dynasty Warriors back in the day, but I did not keep up with a lot of the later numbered entries. I want to say the last one I really thoroughly played was 5. I dived into them a little bit. I've spent a little time with some of the other ones like Samurai Warriors, and I forget the name right now, but there's the other one that gets more mythical and has gods and stuff as playable. I've touched those very briefly, but really most of my Muso experience has been more like the collab titles. Hyrule Warriors, Fire Emblem Three Hopes. It's a little more different, but like Persona 5 Strikers, all that good stuff. And so going into Origins is interesting because I'm not entirely sure what the long-term plan with this game is, if this is like a reboot point or if this is just like a side series, because it is... The core gameplay is very much Dynasty Warriors. Like if you've played a Dynasty Warriors game, you kind of know the general idea there. You're running around on a map. You're able to take on thousands of dudes by yourself doing really cool moves, and wash, rinse, repeat. Where Origins is different, though, in a way that I think is resonating with a lot of people and is also a bit of experimental, is the framework that's in. And I think this is something where some longtime fans might feel a little alienated, depending on why you like Dynasty Warriors. But I also think it makes for an excellent entry point for someone that just they see a series with 9 entries they've never played, and they're like, I don't where do I even go with this? What is happening? The big change is that in traditional Dynasty Warriors games, there's a very heavy focus on the roster. You just have all these characters that you only start with so many, but by the end of the game, you've got 60 plus different characters to choose from. That some might share some similar fighting styles based on their weapon, but you can have your favorites or people you like for certain factions, that kind of thing. And that's what you see in a lot of the collab games too. The whole point of Hyrule Warriors is play as your favorite Zelda character. Neat. That is not how Origins works. Origins has you as one character who is a brand new, just fictional character just for this game specifically. You name them. You don't have any customization options as far as appearance or anything. It's a set person, but you can name them. And that is who you play as in this game. There are chances to play as other characters for a little bit, but 90% of your gameplay is going to be as this main character that you name yourself. The default name is Wanderer. And so you do have a variety of moves with Wanderer. It's not like they just have a single move set. You start off with a sword, but pretty quickly as you play the game, you'll get spear, fists, and a whole lot of other series iconic weapons and a couple more that mix it up a little bit. I think he has 9 fighting styles total that you can unlock. So you do have a variety of ways you can play. And what's really interesting actually about the weapons to me is that they're very different in how they handle. It's not just oh, you have an XXXY combo and every weapon has one and they all kind of work similarly. It's no, spear has its own unique strong combo attack string where other weapons don't have strong combos. Fists have this whole stance system where by using certain moves you'll assume a stance, and then you have a follow-up attack you can do depending on if you do light or heavy. So every weapon kind of has its own identity, which is really cool. And the game has RPG aspects where they reward mixing it up and trying out different styles. Basically, as you use a fighting style, you develop mastery in it that unlocks new abilities, and your total masteries, like all the mastery you have across all weapons, adds up to like a character level. So you're rewarded for trying out different weapons and leveling them up, especially because it takes a lot less time to get to like level 3 in each weapon than it does to get a single weapon up to level 9.
Okay.
So like the core gameplay with that main character is awesome. Where I do think it can lose some people is that when it comes to the rest of the roster, again, past games, 60 plus. I think Dynasty Warriors 9 had like 80 something playable characters after DLC. I think Origins has like 9 or 10. And even then, you can't like outright pick them as your playable character. The way they do it is they're your companions. Where on a map, you basically pick a tag team buddy, and if their gauge fills up enough in a match, you can tag them in and then use their moveset, which is a little more over the top and even more powerful than what your character normally has. So it's almost like a super mode you can do for a little bit. And that's cool and like gives a lot of flavor to them. But while they certainly picked some of the really big name characters that show up a lot across games, if your personal favorite isn't on there, sorry, just you cannot play as them in this game. So that's a bit of a switch up, but I think it also is what makes it more accessible to new people. And there's all this like cool RPG stuff they're doing with it too, where there's like a world map you walk around. You've got some like basic RPG
saw that.
stats. Yeah, I love it. Like I'm like, oh man, I miss this in more RPGs. Not that we don't have any games that do them anymore, but like you don't see it with that visual style as much anymore. Yeah, honestly, it's just a great time. Like I think the different approach to the framework makes it a great excuse to just be like, you've never played a Dynasty Warriors, like here, like try this then. Because again, when you hear 7, 8, 9, if you haven't played any of these and you don't even know what they're about, like that can feel a little intimidating to jump in on, you know? Like, do I have to play the past ones? Do I have to know what's going on? Which you don't, by the way. Dynasty Warriors is weird to me in that like they have sequential numbers, but it's almost like a series of remakes. It's the same like war and story every time, just done a little bit differently each time. Yeah, and so Origins does that too, where it's effectively like the first half of the story, but they spend a little more time on it. And again, now they have you as a specific character whose POV you're focused on. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that new approach makes it really accessible. And not to mention just like it looks great. Like the number of enemies that can be on screen, like it's always satisfying to see how many dudes you can take out in one move. And there's even more of them on this because technology keeps getting better and we can have more and more ragdoll bodies to just go flying when you do a cool super move.
So the story is more or less the same as previous entries? Or is
yes and no. Like in the sense of there's a general framework, like because this is also based on like an actual fictional story that is a fictional account of a real historical time. So like it always starts with the Yellow Turban Rebellion, and then that transfers into once that's resolved, there's this next conflict that happens, and then there's the point where the 3 big factions end up really going to war with each other, which is the whole Romance of 3 Kingdoms plotline. And so like that general framework's always the same, but specific events and details and character relationships and stuff, those they kind of mess with a little bit each game. And because you are an original new character in this one, they play with that a little more, where it's like you're meeting all these characters that have shown up in past games and you kind of pick and choose who you buddy up with more often and talk to and that kind of thing.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I want to check it out. I again, I've played Muso games, but I've never like kind of was just like, oh, okay, so this is kind of the experience. And not to throw shade on anyone that likes that, but I'm kind of like, okay, this is what the experience is going to be for a lot of the time. I think I've like experienced what I need to,
Sure.
especially when there's like this, like if the story isn't like particularly grabbing me in any sense. But I like again, I've talked to enough people outside of yourself that are just like, yo, this has the sauce that I want to really give it a shot at some point.
And on that note of like story, like that is where they also get a little more interesting with it, because again, you're this new character, and so there's this whole thing where our favorite plot device happens. You have amnesia, you don't know your backstory, so there's a little bit of like uncovering who you were. The game, I think, also takes a slightly bigger step in the kind of fantasy direction, where it's like there was always a little bit of that because again, you're gonna do one cool sword move and 200 guys die, but like they're straight up like a guy doing telekinetic stuff, and it's like, are we hallucinating right now, or is this dude just actually have magical powers? Like there's a little bit more I think fantasy element in the story itself, along with your main character's arc. I haven't finished it, but I've put a good amount of time in, and from what I've seen, like it definitely steps. There's a little bit more of a personal constructed story here than you normally get. Because usually it's more about just the factions and how they interact and who ends up winning, and you can play different characters across that faction. This is like, no, you're this guy seeing the world through his eyes and experiencing this war as them.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
neat.
Okay.
It's neat.
What else have you been playing?
I also picked up Tales of Grace's F. Oh, wait. Crap. I should have said something earlier real quick. I'm a little late for this. Maybe we'll inject it later. Dynasty Warriors Origins, I did get the ability to play that thanks to a code from Xbox. That was not from Koei Tecmo directly, but I did receive a code for that. That was not something I picked up on my own dime. So maybe I'll add that earlier somewhere.
No,
as
you're
for
good.
Tales of
You're
Grace's F, yeah. As for Tales of Grace's F, that one I picked up with my own money. I picked it up. I'm a long time fan of the Tales series. I wouldn't say that I've played like every single one, but I've played the majority of them. And I played Grace's back in the day when it first came out. I'm about 8-9 hours in. I think I just finished chapter 3 out of 9, but the later chapters are also like significantly longer. I'm kind of getting through all the big opening setup. Like I just got the full party, basically. I want to save some thoughts for like a later one once I finished it. But one thing I wanted to share right away about it that I thought was neat is a change they made in the remaster is there's this thing called the grade shop. And in past games, the grade shop was like a new game plus feature where you accumulated grade points over your playthrough, and then when you start new game plus, you can like buy different upgrades in the grade store. The remaster, that's just available from the start, and they give you enough grade points to just buy whatever the hell you want, like right away. And at first that felt weird to me because again, it was like a new game plus thing before, so it was like, oh, this is meant to like, make new playthroughs feel weird. But as I kind of chewed on it a little longer and thought about what the options are, I really like it from an accessibility standpoint and like a customization standpoint as well, because there's options that are things that make the game easier, like increasing XP gain, SP gain, which is like how you learn new skills and like develop your class abilities and stuff. There's other options that like just double everyone's damage, so combat is way faster and deadlier. So there's just really interesting ways of just keying your game in right away that, like, in retrospect, never really needed to be locked behind finishing it, I think. Like, it was kind of an excuse before to make new playthroughs feel different. But having that option right away, I don't think robs that. Like, if you want the vanilla experience, you can have the vanilla experience. But if you're like, you know what, I don't want to grind, just give me that XP bonus. Give me I want to do the bare minimum number of fights. Still have a good challenge, but like I don't need to like do every encounter I run into. Let me level up faster. So I just thought it was a really neat update part of it that makes it just a little easier to ease you into it right away. I want to share some more in-depth thoughts about the game a little later once I'm more into it. I will say that like my experience so far does match up with how I remember Grace's, in that like if I were to rank it against other Tales games, I don't really care about the writing. Like the story is just not like, it has some okay parts, but like I just generally don't like the dialogue in it and the story in it. But it's like series peak combat. Like it is so fun to play. Like it just like if you're okay dealing with a story you don't care that much about, you just want like a fun combat to go through. Like this is one of those games where I don't get tired of random encounters because it's just fun to style on enemies and do combos, and it's just a good time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I liked Tales of Arise, and but like I don't think I was as high on it as other people were.
Sure.
But I do think like that the combat, which I know that like kind of takes from Grace's, like Grace's was like the start of like this kind of upgrade in the combat.
Yeah.
That was something that I really liked, like that they were able to implement these like this combat system that made the fights fast and fun, and also you're just like quick in and out, like of ways to so
like once you get good at it, I mean, combats can take 15 seconds. Like it's
exactly,
like you're just screaming through it. Because the one big change that Grace's makes that's really cool is that all the Tales games have been action RPG things where you go into a battle arena, but a lot of them still relied on certain like JRPG traditions, like having MP. And Graces was like, look, what if we just got rid of MP? Like, you just use your moves. You have like a little action point thing where like you can't just spam nonstop. You have to like kind of take breaks between combos. But like just do your cool moves as often as you like. The balance for that for magic users is that magic has casting time and it can get interrupted if they get hit. So you're like encouraged to protect them and try to keep them more on the back line.
Okay.
But like it just enables you to focus way more on fun styling and not just be like, oh man, I got to spend an orange shell to keep my DPS up. Like no, you just keep going.
Okay. Yeah. I um admittedly I probably won't get to that game anytime soon because I want to do a series playthrough of like at least what's out in the West, and
Yeah.
that is something that
There's quite a few.
it's quite a few. I want to play them in order. Thankfully they're not super long compared to like some other JRPG franchises, so like I don't think it'll take that long to get through them
Yeah.
comparatively to some other series playthroughs I want to do. But I like playing them in order because I like to see how those like franchises evolve over time. Yeah. But that's cool. It's good, and like I know that I feel like the Tales of series is kind of like this comfort food JRPG franchise.
Very much so. Like
So
kind of like how we've talked before with Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, how those always reinvent themselves. I'm not going to say that Tales doesn't make changes and try things out and experiment, but it takes a whole lot less risks. Like that is a series
yes.
where like, and I will say that was something, a part of the reason why I stopped playing at a certain point, because I think I got a little genre fatigue where I was like, I know what a Tales game is now. Like I get, like I see it. Like I've played enough of these to where I've had my fill. And Arise fixed that a little bit. I think Arise did mess with things a little more, and it was after a much longer gap in releases because they were more than one a year for a little bit. Like they were releasing games like crazy for a little while, just back to back to back.
Yeah, during the PS3 era, like it was a lot.
It was a lot.
Yeah, because it was they did 4 in the PS3 era. They had both Zillia games. They had Graces, and then they had the Zestiria, because Zestiria was a PS3 game initially, and then it got a PS4 port, correct? Or it might have been cross-gen release. But I know that was on PS3.
So in the West, it was actually an Xbox 360 exclusive. That was like in the
not Vesperia, not Vesperia.
Oh, sorry, which one?
Zestria.
Oh, Zestria. Was Zestria not just straight up PS4? Did that have a PS3 version?
I'm pretty sure it came out on PS3 as well.
I'll look it up real quick.
But Vesperia did come out during that time too, and that was an exclusive. That was the only one I played.
So that outside was of PS3 as well. I forgot that. Yeah, I thought that was
that's crazy. That's like that's 5 games in like what? Like how long was that generation? Like 6 or 7 years?
7 years about, yeah.
That's
because I looked up a timeline before, and I remember just being like, "Holy crap!" So okay, here it is. Okay, so just really quick, from 2002 to 2005, they released 5 games, not remakes, not ports, just straight up 5 new titles: Tales of Destiny 2, Tales of Symphonia, Tales of Rebirth, Tales of Legendia, Tales of Abyss. 06, they take a break. Then there's 4 games in a row in a 3-year time span, where it's Tales of Innocence, Vesperia, Hearts, and Graces. Year gap, then Tales of Xillia, then Tales of Xillia 2. Like they were just constant for a little while.
Wait, was Tales of Hearts originally a PS3 game that got ported to Vita, or was it just a straight up Vita game?
It was a DS game that got ported to Vita. It had a totally different playstyle. Originally, it was like a cameo focused game. Like you would summon characters from past games, and they would show up as assists and stuff.
Okay.
And they just totally got rid of that for the Vita version. The Vita version's actually it's like the same story, but a lot of the gameplay is actually very different from the original DS version.
The DS version didn't get ported to the US though.
No.
So like so the Vita version's the only
there's quite a few that still haven't come out here. I don't think we ever got Rebirth. We never got Destiny 2. We got a Destiny 2, but it's actually Tales of Eternia that got retitled Destiny 2 for marketing purposes, and that's just confusing for everyone that wants to play the series. And then I think Innocence
we have Tales of Legendia. Is that how you pronounce that? That didn't come. That hasn't gotten a port.
Yeah, they did. That was on PS2.
Yeah, but it hasn't gotten a port yet.
Oh yeah, there's not like an
Like a
update for
remaster.
sure. Sure.
Yeah,
There's
because
a
like
lot that haven't been remastered yet. Yeah.
yeah, I mean like yeah, I mean I feel like anything that is pre PS or post PS4 doesn't need to be like remastered. Like we don't need a Berseria remaster. We don't need
Sure.
a Zestria,
Yeah. But like
Zestiria.
we haven't gotten any of like the 2D ones in a while. Fantasia, we there was like I think the last one we got here was on GBA. There was a PSP remake we never got. Tales of Destiny, I think that's still trapped on just PS1. We never got Destiny 2. I think
Which
Eternity is still trapped on PS1.
I heard there was a rumor that I think it was Tales of Destiny is getting a remake. I
Oh,
don't know if that's actually going to happen, but like not a remaster, but like a remake.
yeah, which is interesting because it did get remade. We just didn't get that version either. They did a
Oh,
remake
yeah.
for it on PS2 where it was the same engine and style as Tales of Destiny 2, which we also never got. I would love that. I would be great if they gave us Destiny 1 and 2 because again, we never got 2. So like I would love a duology collection like that. I think that'd be neat.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I mean, they said that they're doing more, so
Yeah.
like I feel
There's a
like
promise there.
Xillia 1 and 2 are the ones that make the most sense next.
Yeah.
But literally any of them, like I don't care. Like just making them more accessible is
Yeah.
I am easy to please with that stuff. Just like, oh, I can play it on my modern console. Cool.
Yeah. No, same. I hope at some point they fix the Symphonia one because that's still a shame.
Yeah, that is a real damn shame they dropped the ball on that one. Because like if in my opinion, like if any Tales of character were to come to Smash, it would be Lloyd Irving.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So, well, some people might think Yuri from Vesperia. So
Yeah, but like Symphonia was, I think, one that was like one of the ones that really got the most international acclaim. Like I think that's when a lot of the West became aware of Tales, and that was a GameCube title originally. I mean, they even had a Tales of. There was even a GameCube in Japan that was a Tales of Symphonia Special Edition. That was like this pearl green kind of color. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because there was also it was a port, but they did do Symphonia 2. Like it was like the Symphonia Chronicles because it came with Symphonia and Symphonia 2.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Symphonia 2 is not remotely as allotted as the first one, but I would still like it on modern platforms. Like, you did the first one, do the second one, like give it to us. So
that collection was on PS3, I think, and that was the last time we got both of them. Yeah.
Yes. Because it was originally a Wii game, right?
Yes, it was originally a Wii game. Yeah, it was one of those, like, there were a bunch of games that got direct sequels from GameCube to Wii, and that was one of them. Dawn of the New World was the title. And yeah, that never got a PC port or anything. That is just strictly Wii and PS3.
Yep. Okay. Now we're going to get into the topic of the show for this week. Kevin, you proposed this topic. I'm going to let you take the reins here.
Sure. We were trying to think of what our next topic should be because we didn't want to do another listicle of stuff coming up. And, this just came to me and I was like, let's talk about this a little bit. We actually touched on this very briefly when talking about upcoming games. I think it was, we were talking about Persona 6. Silent protagonists. Yay or nay? Like, how do you feel about those?
Yeah, do you want this to be more about like silent protagonist yay or nay, or like silent versus talking protagonist?
I mean, that's ultimately what yay or nay is, right? Like, are you like?
There's there's
kind of midpoints, sure, but like ultimately, do you? Because I'm not counting like if you have dialogue options, but you still just don't really say anything and stand there and it's never voiced. That's still a silent protagonist to me.
I agree.
Like Persona are silent protagonists.
I agree.
You have dialogue options, but they're not a voiced person outside of like combat yells.
Yes.
And like, Link yells a lot, but he's still a silent protagonist and you shake your head yes or no to things. Like how do you, because like, look, I'm personally of the mind where I feel like either is fine as long as it's done well. I think there are games where silent to me makes sense. But I know quite a few people who are very opinionated and are like, no, I hate silent. This is the dumbest. And really the biggest reason why this has been in my head lately is specifically because of metaphor. I have seen so many people bring up metaphor in relation to Persona where they're like, man, this game has made me so aware of how much I want my Persona protagonist to actually have a personality and speak more like Will does. because they don't. And Will doesn't talk a ton, but it is a lot more than any given Persona protagonist. And I actually kind of disagree for Persona specifically. I think Persona should stay silent. But like, how do you just feel about it?
Yeah. In general, I'm kind of like you, kind of like what we were talking about with like the Donkey Kong situation, where it's like I have no real like horse in the race.
Sure.
It's really just like how it's utilized. But if I had to make a stance, I would say that I prefer talking protagonists over silent protagonists. But also, I definitely think that silent protagonists can be used super duper well. I think that I agree with you. I think Persona, because here's the thing, like I feel kind of the opposite, where like with the metaphor stuff, where like I was like, man, why doesn't my protagonist talk in Persona? Like da 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 da. And then I got to metaphor, and then the Persona, the Will talked, and I was just like, oh shit, he's talking. Okay, cool, dope, and just more like as the game and story continued onward, the more I was just realized like he doesn't really need to talk. He could have been a silent protagonist. Like I don't see
Now, is
anything that makes me feel like that, like, oh, this should be like a talking protagonist.
sure, but is that a
And
failing of how they implemented giving him dialogue? Like, do you think if they had given him even more dialogue and more
one of
expressive,
one
would
of
you walk away feeling different?
one of my biggest issues with Atlas, like Studio Zero games, like Persona and Metaphor, is like the choices feel so inconsequential. Like it feels borderline pointless to me. In those games where like when you play when you do like the social bonds, the social links, whatever you want to call them, like in those instances, yes, you need to like if you pick the best answer, you get like the better increase in like
Yeah,
in those things. But when it
min-max
comes
efficiency.
to like the general story stuff outside of that, like I don't really care a whole lot about what this character is going to say, because it's going to be something in the same boat. Like you'll get three choices or two choices. It's basically going to be the same thing regardless. So like it's kind of like, why are you wasting my time with this?
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think that there are some but why I like Persona being silent specifically is that I think Persona is a much more self-insert type RPG
Absolutely.
versus like a metaphor where it's like, no, this is a character that yes, you are like controlling, but like he has his own thing going on. Like it's not like you were supposed to self-insert. At least I don't perceive it that way. And I think that once you get more into the narrative of that game, like the thick of it, and while I not trying to get super deep into metaphor spoilers, like I just think that there are certain narrative choices that were made that could have been more powerful if it and they really didn't need to change anything majorly to make the things that I wish they had done work. I think it would have been fine. Uh it just doesn't hit the same to me as like a Persona, and especially Persona 3. Like especially I said this before, but like Persona 3, having played Persona 3 Reload and replaying Persona 3 in general, I have definitely gotten a newfound appreciation for that game, which
Hell yeah.
I already thought was like phenomenal, to be
Yeah.
clear. But like the way that it handles its themes and the way it handle like how it uses the calendar system, and specifically, and like you being like the silent protagonist and self-inserting yourself with those characters for the story that they're trying to tell is super impactful. It's super impactful in a way that I don't think hits as hard as like Persona 4, which is my favorite Persona, or Persona 5. there's like there's a more direct purpose behind those things. And I think that metaphor does have a more direct purpose in its narrative in other ways, but not particularly with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that specific like kind of comparison, like I think it just depends on the game. Some games do it really well, some games don't, and like I don't think it hurts metaphor that Will speaks, but I also like don't see a lot of the added value for him to be a speaking protagonist.
I agree, and I will say I think Persona for me is a series where like it just does make sense to have a silent protagonist. Like it works more for me. I can understand the approach of wanting a stronger personality, because even though you have choices and stuff, I would say each Persona protagonist does have a lightly implied personality that does differ from each other. Like Three's is a little more like circa that age, emo, isolationist, keeping to himself, which is, I mean, that's even part of the plot of that game, is like learning to open up to other people. Whereas like 4 and 5, there's maybe a little bit more innate charisma for both of them compared to 3. So I think some people want, like, they see those scratchings of the personality and are like, I don't need to be a self-insert. Just give me, like, I want to see that person be as fully fleshed out as the rest of the party. Especially because, like, in supporting material, you see them get fleshed out more, right? Like, especially P4's protagonist across, like, Arena and other games, they give him a lot more dialogue and personality versus what we've seen for some of the other ones. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of, like, how well it's handled. Because there's some series where it does feel more awkward to me. This is going a little farther back, and it's not a silent protagonist in the sense that they're not just simply like not voiced, because there was no voicing in this game. But one game where it did always stand out to me as a little more bizarre was Golden Sun. And the main reason why it's weird in Golden Sun is if you play both games.
Okay.
Did you play them?
I've not played Golden Sun, no.
Okay. So not getting heavy into spoilers or anything, but one immediate thing, like, I guess minor spoiler. In the second game, you play as a different character. Like, you have a different main character out the gate. But the main character from the first game still shows up. They are still a part of the story in parts, because it is a direct continuation. 1 and 2 are a duology. They're meant to be played together. And what's weird about that is the one you're playing as is a silent protagonist while you're playing as them. But in the other game where you're not playing as them, they're fully voiced and have a personality and do everything.
Yeah.
And so it's super bizarre, where it's like, you know, you're playing through 1 and you see this character that you're going to be playing as in 2, and they have all this dialogue and all this like personality and stuff. And then you get into Lost Age, and while you're playing as that character, it's just like, shake your head yes, shake your head no. That's your entire personality now. And it just felt so goofy when you have that back to back. Because I think with silent protagonists, it's very important that it's almost like a weird in-universe thing, that they're also kind of silent protagonists. Like Link, you know, we all kind of accept that Link doesn't speak, but he's got his yells going on and kind of talks somehow to people sometimes when there's dialogue stuff. But you just kind of accept that he's a mute. And sometimes games will even like joke about that. I think another example too, where I think like silent protagonists really work out, is when the game plays on it too in a fun way. I forgot how much I loved Super Mario RPG's depiction of Mario until I played the remake. Because it goes full-blown like, oh, well, Mario's quiet. Mario can't talk. Mario just does his, you know, voices and such. And so they do this whole thing in that game where every time it's time for Mario to talk to someone or do something, he just breaks into pantomime. Like, he'll just, like, he'll like, oh, this happened, and it's like him spinning around. Somehow he turns into Bowser and makes noises. It's like really weird slapstick comedy where Mario just has to explain everything as a mime. And I love it. It's so ridiculous. I think it's such a fun play on the idea of, no, he's literally a silent protagonist. We're not just, like, not scripting this out so you can't hear it. Like, this is just how he is.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm trying to think about some other characters that I do like. I actually think Pokemon does a great job of having a silent protagonist, especially in like where they do it literally in Gold and Silver, right? You go to Mount Moon or Mount Silver, and Red is there, and he doesn't say anything because he's a silent. He's silent. He's a silent protagonist, and I really love that. I really love how they play that, because you're just like, when you see him, you're like, oh, what's he gonna say? What's he gonna say? And it's literally just like two full screens of just
Dot.
dots.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just like nothing.
I forget. Did they do that same joke in Sun and Moon? Because you run into Red and Blue in that, like, later on, right? Or do you only run into Blue? I can't remember now. It's been a bit.
I don't know. I haven't played Sun and Moon since it first came out.
Yeah, because
And
the
I
whole thing where,
don't.
like, they visit for, like, oh, we now have our Elite Four, and trainers from across the world are coming to check it out. And I think that was also where we were getting, like, theories and rumors about Red and Blue being remade again, which ended up being Let's Go. But yeah, I think Red shows up in that as well, and I forget if they keep that joke around where it's like Blue does all the talking, and then Red's just like, I'm also here.
That would be funny. That'd be funny if that's true. I don't know. I haven't played it in a while, and like, I admittedly, like, I'm not crazy about Gen 7 outside of Rowlet. Rowlet's my boy, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm not crazy about anything past Gen 5 really, but
yeah, Gen 4 for me. So I do like that a lot. But then, like, also, yeah, again, it really just kind of depends on, like, the stories that are being told, right? And, like, the type of journeys that they're going on. Because, like, I think that, Hero in the Dragon Quest games makes a lot of sense being silent protagonists.
Yeah. I guess here's the other way to think about it, though. I hate that I keep going back to Persona, but I feel like Persona is such, like, the big example for it.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like, the battleground for it, where people want to see it added. If they changed the framework a little bit, like, let's say for 6, right, they decide to ditch having a silent protagonist, and let's say even what you were complaining about, where you're like, I think the choices don't really matter, it just impacts, how quickly you get Bond. Let's say they reworked that and they just got rid of choices like that in general. Do you think how it is now versus, like, a fully voiced, fully fleshed out protagonist, and even, like, has more, scripted out development arc as part of the storytelling, do you think that would ultimately result in a better Persona game to you?
I don't think so. No, because, like,
think...
even though I don't like those choices, like, it's kind of just like how the game is. Like, it's like it has to exist to make what they try to do with Persona games work. Like, you are supposed to choose who you want to hang out with, like, who you want to spend your time with. You were like, and you are, like, it is a self-insert. You were self-inserting yourself as to, like, who your favorite people that you get to hang out with is. Like, that's why there's, like, this whole, like, whenever a new game comes out, people are just like, oh, this person's best girl. Oh, I really like this party member. And then I'm just like, like, people, and then I'm just like, that's crazy. Like, and it's because, like, you are having your own experience with that game, because you are having your own version of it with your own main character.
Sure.
And I think that, like, if you were to make them a lot more personalized, personality wise, which I do think Persona 5 does a great job at, like, giving a personality to the silent protagonist, even though he's a silent protagonist. But I don't think, I feel like if you were to just have, like, a consistently voiced main character that has a specific personality, he would either be too personalized or not personalized enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like, and I don't think there would be, like, this kind of perfect middle ground where everyone is satisfied with, like, how this main protagonist is being executed.
Sure. And I mean, that absolutely is a big thing. I remember jumping out of JRPGs a little bit, Dragon Age. So Dragon Age Inquisition did this whole thing where the main character from 2 would show up for, like, one of the missions, and they would be along, and, like, they were your character from 2. Like, you could recustomize their appearance to, like, match up with how you made them in 2. You would pick their class, and it's like, oh, I'm bringing back. They're called Hawk. No matter, like, that's just, like, their last name set in 2. You're always this human whose last name is Hawk. And there were a lot of people who were very mixed on how that was handled, because it's like, oh, like, yeah, like I made Hawk like a warrior, but I always was using sword and shield, and this game's having him use a two-handed sword. And oh, like, yeah, I used this personality, but I don't think my Hawk would react this way to these situations or would have these things. And so, like, some people are excited by the idea of, oh, they brought this character back and are giving them personality. But now that it's no longer entirely in your control to headcanon and make choices and stuff, you start having those incongruities where it doesn't match up with what was in your head. And I think that's what Persona does, right? Is sure, there's implied personalities, but there's so much room to also headcanon and establish, what your take on the main character is. And the more fleshed out they get, the harder it is to do that.
Yeah, and I actually think that Persona 3 Portable, the FemMC, is the best representation of like silent protagonists in that series.
Mm-hmm.
Because like they personify her through like gestures and actions a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they're engaging with different characters, you can like tell that this is a kind of like the antithesis of like the male MC, where she is
Way more
bright,
upbeat.
she's bright, bubbly, upbeat, like energetic, and it's all through like those type of things that they use in the dialogue, or like just like the text of more so.
And
And
even
I
like
think
they even do it like kind of UI and vibes, because like she has her own
yes,
soundtrack where like the soundtrack's different for everywhere. It's not just like, oh, your battle theme's different. It's like, no, like while you're at school, it's a different song. And like
yes,
the UI is entirely redone, where you have this dark blue everywhere for the male MC that gives it this bit of a gloomy feeling. Which 3 is overall a very somber game. Like it feels more like an older
100%.
SMT game tone wise than later Persona games do. But when you play as Femc, it's all this like bright pink, and with the music changes and like you're saying, the character like movements and animations, like it does feel like a very different lead.
Yes, exactly. And I haven't even finished the FMC route yet, but I know a lot of people that like love Persona will like ride or die that like she is the best protagonist in the series because of like those type of things. And I think that like when it does translate, like, because the thing is like when I think about this is that there's a lot of other media, right, outside of these mainline titles, whether it be other video games or movies or anime or whatever, where like having a silent protagonist doesn't work. You can't do that. And like I don't think that the personal, like having them talk in those instances is a bad thing, because it's a different type of experience, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not, it is the experience in those Persona games specifically, when you are like, you have a calendar system, you only have so much time, you have to use your time wisely. You are making the choices of who you want to hang out with, who you want to befriend more. Like that is such a specific experience that happens in those games. So when like there are other instances where those characters return and it's not that same experience, it doesn't really matter to me. Like it doesn't, like, as long as like they're still like, if they're just meeting the kind of personalities that those original games exude for those characters, then I think that it's perfectly fine if they're like full speaking dialogue characters. That might be an unpopular opinion, but I do think that like the reason why silent protagonists work in instances are based off of like the experiences that the experience of what the developer wants you to do.
Sure. Yeah, no, I
Because like,
agree with that.
yeah, because like it's like, it's just like the it's like the exact opposite, like for Trails, right? Like if the Trails series were all these different main characters, like if Stell was just like a silent protagonist, like it wouldn't be the same,
Yeah.
because that's not the type of experience that Falcom is trying to give the player, or like have
Right.
the player experience. It goes both ways.
So another franchise that leans into silent protagonists, and I think this is similar to some of the games we've talked about, but also a little different, because I feel like it tries its best to just give zero personality at all. And I know you've only worked your way through so many of them, but Dragon Quest.
Yeah. Okay.
Because Dragon Quest is very like just like no, like we're not giving any kind of like, it's like you say yes or no to things and you go about your quest, but the main character is for the most part very much devoid of personality. Like you get it a little more in like 11. It's hard to dodge in like the fully 3D ones because facial animations and stuff are a thing, but like especially like 3 HD 2D, like you're the hero and everyone talks to you and you don't reply to anyone. It's kind of Pokemon energy a little bit, right, in terms of how much personality you have. Especially with those ones where like, you know, I think 3, it works very well because it is an older school style one, top down, you're already a little more detached. But when we're looking at later ones, have you ended up playing 11 at all? Or did you like, are you waiting to get through older ones?
I'm waiting to get through, yeah.
Okay. So
I started it, but I not enough to even give you a real
that is one where I'd be interested in seeing your thoughts on whether or not silent works there or not, because you know, especially because Dragon Quest, it changes a little bit from game to game, but I would say 8 and 11 more than the others lean a little bit more in the direction of like a Final Fantasy type structure where you have a specific cast of characters and there's a very specific story you're going on and they all have their own specific abilities and play styles, whatever. And I think it's in those games where people have a little more trouble with silent protagonist, because it's like there's this big epic plot and there's, you know, cutscenes playing out where the big bad is doing something and then here's my main character, like, you know.
No, that is fair. I think the way, like, at least the way that I see Dragon Quest games is like you're create, well, like, I mean, like, you know, this hero exists and you are like it's kind of like Pokemon. You're creating this journey for them to go on, and you are both like directly influencing it, but you are also a spectator. You're spectating like what is happening when these story beats are happening. And so like for me, I like that about Pokemon and Dragon Quest. Like I think it fits because of like the type of game that it is trying to be. Because that also works in the first Final Fantasy, right? The first Final Fantasy is the only Final Fantasy where where it's silent protagonists, more or less. And it's like you choose these 4 heroes to go on this journey, and you go on this journey, and you know, that's it. Like it's a similar experience to Dragon Quest. Like and that's why I think that like having a silent protagonist in that, especially in Dragon Quest, as like the main character, is like, you know, you have the other characters to kind of engage with to help personify the hero a bit. 3, not as much, because it's like basically like the mercenary system, right? So like those characters aren't like a traditional party, but like you know, I do think like having the party in Dragon Quest 4 like helped enhance things. Again, like I don't like how the structure of that played out, but like that's cool. And like I'm not gonna get super into Dragon Quest 5 right now because I'm still like a little over halfway through it. I love Hero and Bianca. In Dragon Quest 5. Like they're like dude,
OTP.
when it comes to like JRPG duos, like they're top 5 for sure for me. Like think about like Estelle and Joshua, and like, you know, those kind of like girl boy like duo dynamics. Like
Cloud and Tifa, the one canon relationship that counts for 7.
Yeah, because and the reason why is because Bianca is like this opposite of the yin to like the yin to heroes yang, right? Like she is like this very upbeat, very like bashful like personality, and Hero is this type guy that like and I just they vibe, and like somehow they make it vibe and work so well.
I want to apologize in advance to our audio only listeners, because there's like been 4 occasions this episode where
we're just like idle posing,
like just like we just like rigid up, like straight face, just like the character's just like, and y'all don't get to see that. This might be a good, if you're listening right now, go like check the timestamp and go to YouTube and just check some of these.
but yeah, I think that those 2 characters work really well together. Because of that specific thing. And so again, it really is just dependent on like what the developer is trying to do from a narrative sense, from a like experience just as a video game. Like, I really really like it. Like when it's good, it's like it's really good, and I think that I do think it is hard to make a compelling like silent protagonist. Um, but I do really I do prefer like a talking protagonist because I do like a more like set narrative, and I think like the narratives in general are normally stronger in with talking narratives, but in talking protagonists. But I also think like Persona and Metaphor and like a lot of what Atlas does um proves that it can be done really well with a silent protagonist. But again, like I think that kind of what we were talking about before, how you can't like change some of the stuff from those games because it wouldn't make sense anymore. Like the experience would fundamentally, if it changed, it would fundamentally like change how the silent protagonist versus like a talking protagonist would work.
Sure.
It's like a pro and a con to those games because like I
Yeah.
do wish like Persona like in certain aspects switched up things. Like we talked about like, oh, what are some things that we wish Persona 6 would do differently or what would add? Um and like some of those things I do want, but also I'm like, does that completely ruin the formula of
Yeah.
Persona if that were to happen?
Yeah, and Persona is a more like extreme example of that because there are some other series where they do experiment going back and forth a little bit. Like you were saying, Final Fantasy, we have a couple entries where it's a silent protagonist, but it's also because it's like make a party and call it a day. It's mainly 1 and 3
Yes.
that have that vibe. One game that actually does that, one series that did go back and forth a little bit, and I liked when it messed with voicing, Suikoden. So Suikoden
Okay.
did it well, and it does it for an interesting reason. So the first two games are silent protagonists, and you're meant to self-insert a little bit and make your dialogue options every now and then, but it's mostly just like yes no type stuff. And then 3 did this whole experimental thing where instead of having the one protagonist, it actually had 3 protagonists, and you would swap between them and seeing how their stories lined up and intersected, and eventually you do pick like one to be your main. But
Okay.
because it has these 3 protagonists, they can't really just have 3 silent protagonists and have them interact eventually and like have that be weird and not really work. So they are all fully fleshed out characters. And actually, I think once you do assume the personality of one, like as your permanent, I think they do become a little bit of a silent protag. Like they tend to have a little bit less unique dialogue constantly because now that's the point where it's like you're locked in as who you are.
Yeah.
Um, but it was interesting in that particular game because those games do, while they have their own unique gimmick, they do follow the kind of traditional JRPG structure of there's a specific story being told that you're playing out and experiencing. Uh, and I think actually voicing them did work out better in 3. Part of it was again because of that multiple protagonist thing, but then I wonder in retrospect, like when I look at the other entries or I look at Euden, like how much am I really getting out of the silent protagonist? And again, I think I land mostly where you do too, where it's like I don't have the strongest horse in this race. Like I just don't I don't care that hard. Because at the end of the day, like I think there are a lot of great examples where silent works, and I can't even picture the other way around. But there is that occasional game where I'm just like, was that actually necessary for this one? Like for this one, I think it is for Persona. I don't know if it is for like Dragon Quest XI.
Yeah, I once I eventually get to Dragon Quest XI, I would like to kind of revisit this conversation, see if I feel any different, or even
Sure.
like Dragon Quest 8, because like Dragon Quest 8 is also a 3D entry as well. Seven is too, right? Seven's 3D.
Yeah, 7 is 3D as well. It's a little simpler though. I feel like 7, it's hard, like it's kind of a vibes thing. I feel like 7 works better with silent protagonists, just the way its story arc and stuff is done.
Mm-hmm.
um 8 and 11 to me have a little bit more structured story vibe where like I think a voiced protagonist could make a difference.
Okay, yeah, and another thing like that I lightly touched upon, which I think just applies to like most, like all silent protag JRPGs that have a party, is that like you need to have a great supporting cast to like
Yeah.
to to uplift the silent protagonist and like make those that that feel meaningful. And I think that like that's something that again Persona does really well. Specifically and like just Atlas in general. And so
that's
and
actually,
like go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's actually a really interesting point relative to what I was bringing up about Suikoden, because I think that is where Suikoden has a bit of a failing, is that a big focus of that series is you can get 108 characters, and there are some of them that are early on like kind of forced to stick around with you and are there for plot development. But by endgame, I mean, you can have all kinds of different parties and mix it up all kinds of different ways. And so maybe that's why there changing to a voice protagonist in 3 works more, because it doesn't have like a set, 6 supporting characters that are always around and have, very specific big arcs. That's it. That's a good point to bring up.
Yeah, and so like I think that plays a big role as well. There's like multiple different facets as to like what can make a silent protag work or not work. And like in all honesty, like I'm trying to really think about, because we're primarily like hovering around, and I don't want this like conversation to go too long because it feels like we're wrapping it up. But like I'm trying to think about like other franchises that are notoriously like silent protag that isn't like that what we've talked about, like Persona, Dragon Quest, and
I would say
Pokemon.
a big one for a lot of people, and like I touched on this very briefly earlier, but I feel like I've seen that for Zelda a lot, where like I think some people have gotten tired of Link being silent.
Yeah,
I don't know if I agree.
I have zero horse in the Zelda race. I didn't grow up with Zelda. Like Zelda was like a big just miss in my growing, like, my childhood. But like I feel like that's just like, I feel he has to be. I feel like it's just an iconic thing that he's just like this, silent like hero.
Yeah.
Kind of like Dragon Quest. Like I think like those two franchises should never like have their main character talk.
Yeah,
It's just too iconic.
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree. There's like a part of me that I would say is like curious what a voiced Link situation would look like. And that's the thing too, right? We're getting an anime. I don't know what we're getting. I forget. Did they confirm live action for the movie?
It's live action. But here's the thing, kind of like we were talking about. I was talking about earlier. Different media. I don't care. I don't care. Right. Like as long as not in the game, that's fine. Like you can have. I don't know. I know that there's a Dragon Quest movie that's based off of like Dragon Quest V. I don't know if the hero talks in that movie, but I don't care because it's not the game. And like because with the game, you're having a direct influence over what you're playing. That's we've had this conversation before, or just not us two, but just in general. Like there's this conversation about like what makes games special is that you have direct control over what you're experiencing with playing with a controller, mouse, keyboard, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and you have a link to the world.
So like there is a more intimacy to like what you're experiencing and what you're doing versus watching a movie where that's based on something. It's like cool, like like when I mean, granted, still bad casting, but like Chris Pratt as Mario, it's just like okay, Mario's gonna have a voice, like okay, like and sometimes he like says things here and there, but not in that traditional sense. That I'm just like okay, cool, like the Donkey Kong speaks, okay, cool, like it's a movie, it's not a game, it's different.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, adaptation, that's how adaptation works. Like, you can't translate, like, it's not a direct comparison like that. Absolutely. So, yeah, I guess back to my point, though, is it just like, I'm kind of curious to see what voiced Link would look like, but I agree. I think he should just stay. And that's it.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like, you know what I mean? But was there anything else that you wanted to talk about regarding silent protagonists?
No, I think we're good there. We are under 2 hours right now, so this is our shortest episode to date. If we call it here, it just feels weird that we're like, are we done? Are we done?
I think we're done. I think that I do feel like the first few episodes we were going, the listicles, like right, like we were doing the listicles, and we were just like, oh, here's a 15-minute discussion on this one of like 15 things we want to talk about. So I can understand how the first few episodes were much longer.
Yeah.
But I'm cool with a solid like just about 2-hour episode. Like, that's
Yeah.
good. That's good
No,
with me.
I think hour and a half to 2 is good. I don't know. We're still getting the
Yeah.
we're still getting the vibe of this.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, all of the conversation has been good. I don't feel like that we're just like doing random stuff the entire for half the episode.
Audience, let us know.
Yeah, audience, let us know. But Kevin, where can the people find you?
Y'all can find me at Kevin Kenson. It is just my name. I do not have any kind of fancy gamer title. You'll find me there on Blue Sky, YouTube, pretty much most major social platforms. There's probably an account with that name somewhere. But YouTube is the main place. Subscribe.
Yeah, youtube.com/Kevin Kenson.
Yeah.
And you can find me on social platforms at CamFinalMix. We have social channels like for Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram for the Party Chat pod. It's Party Chat JRPG. I only really we both control the socials. I mainly do it, but we both have access to it. We only really make posts when new episodes go out. That might change over time, but like, because we have our own socials, if you want to follow us, that's what we would probably prefer, but you can do whatever you want. It's your choice. It's your life. Live your best life. But you can, follow the actual pod itself at Party Chat JRPG. And that's it. Until next time.
We should just make
ahead.
up a person. Let's just
make up a person.
Let's just make up a third personality, and they run the Party Chat RPG like Twitter or Blue Sky, whatever. Let's just make up a personality for it. Let's get weird with it.
I don't know how to respond to this because I don't know how we could even entertain. I don't even know how it would work. I don't know how. What's the step by step on that, making that a reality? Someone listening right now is like, I got y'all. I'm gonna get this started for you. Yeah, someone create a third personality combination of the two of us to run our socials. But yeah, that's it. Until next time, everybody. We'll catch you later.
Later.